Hi class, this is JilMac, and I'm the instructor for the Web Development class at the Community College of Vermont. Today I'm going to be talking to you about Assignment 8, and specifically about Chapter 13. And Chapter 13 is Working with Web Fonts. And what I've done is I've put a link on my Assignment 8 page because it's so much easier to go directly to the textbook examples to kind of understand what they're doing. So the assignment is to read chapter 13, but when I say read chapter 13, it's not just reading the book. You really want to interact. Let me blow this up a little bit so we can see it. You really want to be able to interact with the programs while you're looking through your textbook. So the first example, which is on what I like about the way the book is set up, or the website is set up on the book's accompanying website, is that it gives you the page number. So here it is, page 345, and we're working in chapter 13, and we're working with web fonts. And the first example is a CSS. So if we open it up, let me open this a little bit more. This is what the CSS for a web font looks like. We have a font face here, and it tells us what the name of that font family is, and it's Sans Regular, and we have PT Sans Regular. And then we have some other stuff in here, and these happen to be URLs. This is a screen URL and another URL. And this URL is a file. And it's an EOT file. We have an EOT file, we have a WOFF file, we have a TTF file, and that might be kind of new to you, but the TT stands for it's a true type font, and the WOFF says it's a WOOF font, and the EOT is embedded open type. That's the EOT, embedded open type. So these are physical files that we have in our directory. So let me bring up my directory where I've expanded it. This is on my personal website. And if you went all the way back, you could see that I'm down on my C drive. I'm not looking at this on the web. And I'm going to go out to assignment 8. And I'm going to go into chapter 13. And the first one happens to be the font squirrel example. And if we open this file, if we open this folder up, what we see is we see a whole bunch of examples, and I've created some afters. And then we come down to these different fonts. Here's a bunch of EOT fonts right in here. Those are physical files. Here down at the bottom is the PTS font. So if we were to open this up, and I'll open it in Notepad just to see, well, what does it look like? And when you look at this font, it looks like that. It's just a compiled program. It's nothing that you can really see, but it's kind of nice to look at it. And they all look kind of similar as we kind of go through these fonts, but these were downloaded. And in our book, in chapter 13, on page 338 down at the bottom, it gives the website for, I can get rid of this, it gives the website for where these are downloaded from, and it's from www.fontssquirrel.com, and they're all free there. And you can see that, these files have a little bit of size, 27 kilobytes, 30 kilobytes. So when you're loading them in, it takes time for a phone or something to download them, or even a slow computer system. So now we see what these things look like. We have physically looked at what a cascading style sheet looks like for web fonts. And now let's just go back and look at We're in chapter 13. Oops. I made it larger, so I have to scroll down. So that's what kind of understanding a font face and what that looks like, and that it's linking to external files. When we look at the next example on page 346 and 347, we have our example of a regular HTML file. So here's a regular HTML file, and if we right-click on it and view source, we see that it has one style sheet, and that style sheet is example regular CSS. So it's blue and it's underlined, so if I click it, I can open it up. And it tells me that in the body we're going to use the font family PT Sans, which is sans serif. It's going to give it a font size and a line height. And whenever we call up that font face, and the family is PT Sans, this is a family name, this is the name that you have to use, and then it calls these files that are also in the directory. All right. Now, one of the things is that when we get to these, there isn't a lot of difference between them. They're very subtle, and sometimes it's kind of hard to tell. So here, I'm just going to close this and close my inbox. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open each one of these in a separate tab so that we can kind of compare them. So I'm going to click on this one and I'm going to right click it to say open in a new tab. So now that one is on. I'm going to go to the next one. Now this is CSS, so I really want to pull up this HTML. I'm going to right click it again and I'm going to open that in a new tab. I'm going to do the same for example regular. I'm going to hover over it, right click it, and open it in a new tab. This one, I'm going to right click it and also open in a new tab. And the other two are a little different, so we'll kind of get to that. But if you want to see what is the difference between the first example, example regular HTML, and example regular italic HTML, you can click on it and then you can click on this other one. And what you're doing is you're trying to see a very, very subtle change, and where we want to be looking is right here. This is the first example, this is the second. First and second. Oh, I don't want to. First, second. First one, second one. That first one I want to click outside of it. So we're just going back and forth, and you can see how that really it's really groovy is changing kind of almost the size of the E and the spacing in that. So you can kind of see what that's doing. Well, what's the difference between the second example and the third example? So once again, you're going to click it and kind of go back and forth. And can you see that in the third example, which is example, excuse me, example regular italic bold, this header now becomes bold. So as we look at it and kind of go, oops, once you highlight it, you gotta unhighlight it. As you're clicking back and forth, you're seeing this header change size. So that's the difference between example number 2 and example number 3. Now let's look at example number 3 and example number 4. So the difference, what's happening here, what this next program is doing, is it's really making this bold. So it's making that one bold. So let's look at what's the difference between the example regular italic and the example regular italic bold. So that's changing the header. And let's look at this header. So we're going to right click and we're going to view the page. And in order to view the page, we really have to look at the CSS. And then I also want to do the same thing here. I want to right click it and I want to view the page source. So now I have these two page sources, and if I put them side by side, I can do the same thing. By clicking back and forth, you can see that lines 5 and 6 are changing as we're going back and forth. So 5 and 6 are changing, and 1, we've changed the title. Okay. That just changes the tab title. And the other thing that changes as we go back and forth is that we're now pulling a different CSS. This one is pulling example regular italics, and this one is pulling example regular italics bold. Okay, so what's the difference between those two? So let's look at this one. Because it's blue and it's underlined, we can click it and open it up. And then we can click this one and open it up. And now, because I want to be able to compare them, I can click and drag my tab so you can kind of go back and forth. And what's the difference is that this one has a whole new font face, this bold. And it says that it's using the same family, but it's using many of these same files. And let me go back and forth. Oh, it's right here. It's right here what's changed. That the font weight here is bold, and the font weight here is normal. So let's see if we go back and forth looking at them. I mean, this one just adds this whole thing, that the font weight is going to be bold, and it's going to be bold in the body. So that's how you can kind of compare them as you're reading along to see what they're doing, and the textbook goes through them. So now let's look at the example that I did for an after example. Let's go back to the code examples, and we're looking at these code examples in the textbook, but I'm going to go to my examples. I'll bring up my file folder, and I'm going to look at one of these examples where I did example regular. So I took the regular and I changed it to an after. So I'm going to, here's the regular. Let me open it. And I want to open it with my browser. So I'll open it with Chrome. Let me make this a smaller window so I can blow it up. Okay, so this is what it looks like. And I'll blow it up a little bit more. And I'll just move that over. So this is what this regular looks like. And now I'm going to go back to my file, and I'm going to look at the after. And here in the after, I'm going to open it with Chrome also. So here's my, a new tab. Let me just move it. And you can move your tabs around, which makes it really nice. So here's our first one. This is the before, exactly the way it came from the book. And then I changed it. So let's just see. This is 125. And if I go to mine, mine's only 100. So let me blow that up to 125. So they're both the same. As we go back and forth, of course, you can see that what I did in this one was I added text, and I also added this red like drop shadow effect. So how did I create that drop shadow effect? I'm going to go into Notepad just because it brings up the code a little bit easier. And let me just file close all. And I don't want to know. And I'm going to open this file, file open, and I'm going into the regular after, and it's going to be the HTML. So I'm going to open them both. Open with, oh, it doesn't really like me to do two at once, so I'll open with Notepad++, and I'll open this one with Notepad++. So now I've opened both of them, and I'll open my Notepad++. Where is it? Right here. Okay. So here we are in the after HTML. Here we are in the after HTML. And this is giving it a body tag. And I put a little comment in here. And the comment is that I'm adding to the CSS. And I'm putting in what's called a text shadow. Now, if you were doing this in Photoshop, you'd call it a drop shadow. But here we're calling it a text shadow because it's a shadow created from the text. And the syntax goes, this is how many pixels on the x-axis, how many pixels on the y-axis, and how many pixels of blur do you get. And I told it that I wanted it to be purple. So this is just a comment. This is just a comment where I can put whatever I want in. It's not going to affect the outcome. What affects the outcome is that, I have this H1. Because when we look at the code, this is an H1. And that H1 is the one that's being affected, not the paragraph. So let's look in the CSS to see how is that happening. So in the body, we're pulling this PT Sans font. So this is the font we're going to use. H1 says create a text shadow and give it 5 pixels horizontally, 5 pixels vertically, 1 pixel worth of blur, and red. And as you can see, that's exactly what it did. This font family down here, we're using the same files that we were in the previous example. So all that changed is I added an H1 here. Now this code, you go out to JAM 08260 and go into my assignment 8, go into my folder, and you'll be able to copy these files directly. But this is what it is. So where did I get this idea? So I'm going to go back to our class website. Maybe I'll open a new tab. And I'm going to close these. There's a lot of windows open. So here's code examples here in the textbook. Then if I want to look at our class website, I'm just going to go out to JilMac.com. And in JilMac.com, I'm going to click on Workshops and Classes. Remember, Jill just has one L. I'm going to go down to the Web Development. It's on top because I'm teaching it this semester. I'm going to go into Assignment 8. And as I'm scrolling down through the assignment, it tells me to read. But it also wants me to go out to W3 Schools and look at some of their font tutorials. And we'll kind of get to that. And this is part of your research question. I'm just going to skip by that. And I'm going to go down to some of these animations. So when I went out to W3 Schools, I was looking for, what can we do with CSS? And here's one that's an animation. And I'm going to go back. And now I'm going to look at this text shadow. So here is the tutorial for the text shadow out on W3 Schools. And it shows me here that if I click the try it myself, I've got the code over on the left and I've got the effect over on the right, or what it looks like there. If I didn't want this red, I could say that instead of this color, which is FF with 4 zeros, that's your hex code, I could type in yellow. And now when I click see results, my shadow is now yellow. You can kind of see it if I highlight it here. But suppose I wanted to make it a little further apart. I wanted this to be 5, like our example previously, and this to be 5. Or maybe I'll make this one 10. And now if I say see the result, you can see that this text shadow moved down quite a bit and moved over to the right. If I move this to 20 and click see results, now this would be 20. So 5 pixels says I'm going to shift it over 5 pixels. Here, let's shift it over 40 pixels. So I'm going to shift it to the right, and that's because this is your x-axis. The first one is x. And now when I say see result, now that moved that it moved that text shadow, it won't even highlight for me, over 40 pixels and down 20 pixels and gave it yellow. But it doesn't have the 4th code, so let's go back and go and scroll down to the next. Oh, I thought there was another one. Nope, this only has 2. Maybe it's in a different spot I'm thinking of it. Here's more examples. Here's the 3 one, where it has 2 pixels to the right, horizontally, the x-axis, 2 pixels down, which is vertically, 8 pixels is what makes it fuzzy, and then this color. So let's go into the try it yourself. So here I have it, and I have 2 pixels, and 8 pixels with this red. Let's change this to orange. And now I'm going to click see the result. Now my shadow is orange. Suppose I wanted this 2 pixels to be 20 and click see the result. That moved that over 20 pixels, which is about almost the whole size of that T. And suppose I wanted to move it down 40. See the result. It's kind of off, that must be too far off the page. Let's try it 30 and see results. Nope, wouldn't do that one either. So let's do 15. See results. Must be, it's so light I can't see it. Let's make it purple. And see the results. Oh, and in the process, the reason it's not showing up, I'm looking at this now, in the process of doing this, I overwrote that P. Now if we see the results, there, we've got our purple drop shadow. It's 20 over, 15 down, and the blur is 8. Suppose we made this 40 down. And see the result. So that really moved the shadow way down. And suppose we didn't have an 8. Suppose we only had a 2 for the blur. That really cleans it up. It's not quite as blurry. So those are a whole bunch of examples that you can do. And you can just block copy this. You can copy it. You can go over to your notepad. And we could say, give me a new sheet and paste it right in. And then you could save it and upload it. So they're fun to work with. But let's go back to the code examples and then our class website. I should have opened it in a new window. I've been meaning to go back and change that. We go back to our workshops. We go down to assignment 8. And where did I get this idea for this text? So I'm going to stop it here, and I'm going to go into another video to show you kind of how I found this text shadow. I'll talk to you then.